Hi everyone, I hope you're all having a wonderful Wednesday. My name is Nikki Ugin and I will be briefly covering the introduction of this week's article. Today we will be discussing the development of Koreatown and Little Saigon in Orange County. Alright, so on to the next slide please. In their article entitled The Formation of Post-Suburban Communities, Koreatown and Little Saigon, Orange County, Linda Chin Vo and Mary Yu Danico examine how Koreans, a largely immigrant population, and Vietnamese, a primarily refugee population, have proactively navigated their conditions as social agents to integrate non-normative modes of living in Anglo-suburbia. Nationally, Orange County has assumed a predominantly white, wealthy, and Republican identity. Internationally, it's recognized as the location of Disneyland and beautiful surfer beaches. These associations make it even more surprising to accept that Orange County also happens to have one of the most diverse and fastest growing Asian communities in the US. Another important aspect that makes Orange County unique is that most of the noticeable business districts are owned by Vietnamese and Korean populations, as opposed to Chinese or Japanese populations. Okay, on to the next slide, please. Koreatown and Little Saigon considered ethnic enclaves, ethnoburbs, or post-suburban communities. Vo and Danico argue that these two communities are not ethnic enclaves, which facilitate upward socioeconomic mobility for immigrants by creating occupational niches. The primary difference between ethnic enclaves and ethnoburbs is that the latter is not a result of forced segregation, but a relatively voluntary concentration of ethnic people who are seeking to stimulate extensive business connections and maximize their personal and social networks. Ethnoburbs encompass deliberate efforts made by ethnic groups themselves to establish their own jobs and consumer markets as needed by their own community members. These efforts coincide with the rise of self-employment ventures, as we will later see in the next slides. Ethnoburbs also provide a space where ethnics can access familiar linguistic and cultural comforts. For almost 2 decades, there have been numerous efforts aimed at delineating the geographic boundaries of both Little Saigon and Koreatown. Furthermore, the authors recognize both Koreatown and Little Saigon as bustling post-suburban spaces. Put simply, these communities, which were once bedroom communities, have become their own thriving entities. With the influx of more diverse populations in the county and international capital, these post-suburban regions no longer depend on other metropolitan areas for economic or political direction. Next slide, please. Asian ethnic populations face a plethora of structural constraints that produced marginalization, racism, and the sheer destruction of their communities. Although the Korean and Vietnamese communities initially began to come to the county in the late 1970s, one of the primary differences between the development of their communities is that one grew as an immigrant community while the other began as a refugee community. Inexpensive residential and commercial spaces, quieter pace of life, and entrepreneurship opportunities attracted many Koreans and Vietnamese populations to the county. Both populations were also attracted to self-employment opportunities. The picture on the bottom right, which is the Korea Plaza, is one of the most notable establishments that transitioned Koreatown as Koreatown and not just a business district in Garden Grove. Okay, and then the next presenter will be Nadia.
Hi guys, my name is Nadia. I will be covering developing an economic district. Orange County began creating businesses and professional services during the 1970s by Vietnamese and Korean people. The Vietnamese created Little Saigon in Westminster, while Koreans created Koreatown in Garden Grove. These two cities are parallel to each other, but divided by the 22 freeway. Most of the Koreans and Vietnamese people commuted to Los Angeles for work. Vietnamese to Chinatown and Koreans to Koreatown, and both had about a 2-hour daily commute. Both cities saw the need of new businesses for its growing Vietnamese and Korean population. They needed ethnic products, services, and jobs closer to home. In 1978, the first Vietnamese business opened with a produce market, real estate office, medical office, pharmacy, and restaurant. In 1976, the first Korean business opened with a market followed by a furniture store, then a travel agency. These two business districts were not like that of Los Angeles communities of Chinatown, Koreatown, or Little Tokyo that were pedestrian friendly. The Vietnamese and Korean businesses had large distances between them. Also, both had to find ways to finance their ventures. Some saved their money, some pulled money together within their communities, others applied for bank loan or used investors here in the US or from abroad. As both groups had grown their presence in Orange County, and in the year 2000, Vietnamese reported over 2,000 businesses, many expanding to neighboring cities. Koreans in 1996 reported having about 1,600 businesses, but staying mostly within the community of Garden Grove. Both communities had grown, but not without resistance. Initially, both communities lacked financial backing for city improvements. There was resistance from Anglo residents for making Orange County too ethnic and conflict within their own communities. However, these ethnic groups found means to move forward. Businesses pulled together money for city improvements and contributions for local politicians. Eventually, this started attracting foreign investments from the Pacific Rim countries and gathered enough attention of local politicians for support in their communities and causes. Next slide, please. Navigating the political landscape. Both ethnic groups have experienced foreign domination and intervention in their countries. Koreans have dealt with attacks from China, Manchuria, and Japan, while the Vietnamese have dealt with 1,000 years of Chinese domination, 100 years of French colonization, World War II Japanese occupation, several attempts of French recolonization, and a 10-year civil war. Both Korea and Vietnam saw their country split in half, and both have a communist north and democratic south. These factors have influenced the political views of Korean and Vietnamese Americans, with having older generations being more conservative and vote Republican because of the connections back home, business-friendly ideology, and cultural traditions. And younger generations are more liberal and vote Democratic because the connections to the old country are less important than the ones here in the US. Politicians have also noticed the Asian American political power and have made appearances at ethnic events to gather support and financial donations. In 2000, Orange County reported populations of Asian Americans in Westminster at 39% and Garden Grove at 32%. Since then, these communities have continued to grow. Now we'll transfer over on to Angelica.
Hello, my name is Angelica Lara Velasco, and I will be covering establishing a cultural and social space. Both Koreans and Vietnamese have been able to carve out a social and cultural space for themselves, despite having to face opposition. While Koreans and Vietnamese feel that their ethnic communities are inclusionary spaces of comfort where they can be with those who share their customs and language, outsiders can view them as exclusionary places. To celebrate their communities, pass along their heritage to their children, and to bring a touch of home to displaced peoples, the Vietnamese have organized the Lunar New Year Parade since 1994, and Koreans have held parades and festivals first held in 1981. Although these events were organized for co-ethnics, over the years they have been used to build community relations by showcasing the richness of their ethnic cultures and inviting the general public as well as the usual local and state political dignitaries. Koreans and Vietnamese have also made cultural markers in the community through their religious gathering places. Garden Grove has more religious centers than any other city in Orange County. The Vietnamese have also established religious sites that are used as centers for community events and meetings. In Orange County, the majority of Vietnamese Americans are Buddhists, but about 30% are Catholic. While only 8% of the population in Vietnam is Catholic, about 1/3 in the US is Catholic. They have established several Buddhist temples along with a Vietnamese Catholic center that was built for $5 million in 1997 in nearby Santana. Next slide, please. And this is our city, resistance and counter-resistance. Koreans and Vietnamese both faced resistance to their increasing commercial and residential presence in Orange County. One of the crucial political struggles for both ethnic groups has been over putting up signs on local freeways to their communities. On California freeways, there are signs to Chinatown, Japantown, Little India, and other ethnic commercial districts. In Orange County, both communities faced opposition initially from the California Transportation Authority, which expressed concerns about expense, clutter on freeways, and the value of districts. The settlement of Koreans and Vietnamese in Orange County has not been a smooth process, but both communities facing resistance to their increasing commercial and residential presence. The 1980s marked a period of racial tensions. Anti-Asian sentiments grew strong, with the heated debate on English-only ordinances, and the area experienced the fleeing of Euro-Americans. These other tensions in Southern California region did not encourage local politicians to facilitate the creation of Little Saigon or Koreatown. Asian Americans have had to contend with anti-Asian portrayals from an earlier historical period as well as racial stereotypes from the US involvement in the wars in their homeland, which can affect their everyday existence. Now we will move on to the next slide that Jennifer will be covering.
Hi guys, I'll be presenting about the sustainability concerns and points that the Korean and Vietnamese community have regarding keeping their towns alive. Their economic survival may mean building an environment that is inviting for non-ethnic. Although this diminishes the safe haven aspect of these towns, it can lead to their profit and longevity. Also, as socioeconomic positions improve within the community, the Vietnamese and Korean are moving out of Little Saigon and Koreatown. They will need to provide more resources to keep these community members, which has proven to be difficult since they already have been struggling over scarce resources. Since currently, Orange County is headed to be the fourth largest Asian American metropolitan area. Another point is that Little Saigon and Koreatown are competing with other mini Little Saigon and mini Koreatowns that have developed in the OC suburbs, like Anaheim, Buena Park, and Irvine, where Koreans and Vietnamese have left in search for better schools for their children. In both cities, Westminster and Orange Grove, there are approximately 30% of school-aged children, and their role is crucial to shaping the political, economic, and social formations within the community, which is why they need to do more to keep the younger generations. This will allow Little Saigon and Koreatown to sustain their towns. Here on this slide, there's a quote from the article reading, and it really stood out to me. We can see here that Tracy May, 22-year-old, says that there are no bowling alleys, skating rinks, movie houses, or McDonald's. There's nothing there at Little Saigon for us. It's a place for older people and it's not a fun place to hang out. We go there by necessity to eat or buy groceries. This really stood out to me because it really gives us a sense that the younger generation and what they're thinking about these towns as being the older generation and their parents and not theirs, which is why these towns need to cater to the younger generations to keep them as part of their community. In conclusion, we can see how Korean and Vietnamese have changed not only the landscape, but the economic, political, cultural, and social landscape. Politically, this yields not only Republican voters, but also swing voters. We can see that also they were able to carve a social, cultural space for themselves. In 2000, California became the first state to have more people of color than white. In 1998, there was a poll taken that showed 31% of whites believed the quality of life would get worse, and 33% of non-whites believed it would improve. The white residents of Orange County failed to see that as immigration increased, the county's depressed economy became enlivened. We can see that little suburban town of Orange County became transformed by immigration and formed enclaves like Little Saigon and Koreatown.